Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is going to be a video on basic CSS positioning. So I'm going to just kind of set up some sort of very typical sections of a website, and just kind of show my methodology of how I think about it and how I think about positioning things. And I'm primarily going to use Flexbox. So I don't know if I'm going to be using much grid in this particular video, but I do have videos on grid. And again, the purpose of this video is not necessarily the aesthetic part of the design, but the positioning part. So I'm not going to be dealing too much with colors and fonts. I'll try to do a little bit so that way it doesn't look too plain. But the idea is how would I achieve, let's say, for example, let's say here at the Google front page, see this navigation bar, how this section here is all the way flush to the right, and this is flush to the left. How do you achieve that effect? Okay, that's kind of what I'm going for in this video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I opened up a empty folder in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to create some of my basic files. So I'm going to open up the terminal, and I'm going to touch a index.html, a styles.css. I'm not going to worry about JavaScript in this particular video, just HTML and CSS. There we go. Okay, and with that, I'm also going to start a server here. I could use live server, but just to show you an alternative, you should probably have Node.js installed. If you're going to do web development, you're going to eventually need Node. So if you don't have Node installed, make sure you download it. You can always check what version you're running by doing node-v. So I'm running 16.9. So I'm just slightly behind. I would update it right now real quick, but just for the sake of time, I'll do it after this video is over. Okay. So what I can do is I can do a command npx light server, and this command will start a server in this folder that I'm working out of. And see, now I have this server out of localhost 3000. See, it automatically opened up my index.html, which is blank currently. And first, let's actually do that navigation bar effect. Okay, so the way I always think about a website is I think about it as rows. So every sort of UI piece. So if I were to go to Zappos' website, okay. See, this is a row, that's a row, that's a row, and then all the items in the row are Flexbox items. So I generally will build the mockup based on row by row, and that's actually a good technique to use. Look for a site that you like and try to position things and try to replicate it by positioning the things. It doesn't have to look exactly the same colors and all that stuff, but the idea is position things in sort of the same place. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to start off with my index.html. I'm going to use Emmit. Now in this case, I also have this, in case for some reason Emmit doesn't show up. So if I hit exclamation point right now, the normal Emmit tools don't pop up. The reason is, if I go down here, I can see in VS Code what language it's trying to interpret my file with. It's trying to use my Django plugin for when I'm doing Django development in Python. I don't want that. So I can always click on this and I can change it. What I want is just the plain HTML VS Code language tools. So again, in case, always look down here in case maybe it's using some other weird sort of plugin that you have to interpret a particular file that it doesn't give you the tooling you want. Okay? Oh, and I just realized I'm not showing up in the camera. What happened there? So let's see here. Let me actually see if I can address the camera issue. Okay. Nope, that's the intro video. My bad. Okay, and why is screen capture not working? I'll set the settings real quick. See if I can use a different. Oh, nope, that's not what I wanted. That's the wrong. That's screen capture. That's capturing the screen. Discard. Cancel. Discard. There we go. And let's try the video capture device is what I want to change. Yes, let's see here. Does it let me change the settings? No device. Let's try the other one. And does that let you see me? I guess not. Okay, so I guess you won't see me this video. Okay, I'll have to address that later. Okay, but anyways, back to the task at hand. Now that I have this HTML language piece set up, what I can do is I can do exclamation point, and that's going to pop up this Emmit Toolbox. Okay, and with that, now I have my basic HTML boilerplate. And all I really care about is connecting this CSS file. I can also use Emmit to help me out with that. I can start typing in link for a link tag and then choose the one for a CSS file. Okay, and then just change that to styles.css because that's in the same file folder, and we're good to go. So again, I'm always think of things in rows. So let's try to create like that navigation bar effect. So the idea is that we're going to create, I'm going to think of this as part of my header. So I'm going to create a header tag to kind of designate the header of the page, the top section of the page. And I'll just use that, and then I'm going to think of that as my row. Okay? And what I generally want to do is I'm going to create a class called row. That's just going to be sort of the basics of just setting up a row. Okay, and let's see here. What I want is I'm going to want a logo kind of on this side and then the navigation bar on this side. So what we need to do is we're going to generate two divs. Okay, one for the logo. We'll just call this my site, and then another one, actually I'll just use Emmit, div with the class of div with the class of a menu. There we go. And again, that div menu, that's going to have its own sort of a bunch of divs in it. So what I'm going to do in here is we'll say a div with the class of menu item times 5. So 5 menu items. Okay, and I just see that using Emmit can really save us some time in just kind of writing out this HTML. Okay, so we'll just say menu item. Again, the point of here is not so much the content, but the positioning. Okay, so I'm just gonna make a few more edits. Menu. Now I'm going to refresh the page so we can see those changes. Okay, and see right now they're stacking everything on top because that's the natural behavior of a block element. So there's this block that's the header block, that's just a big block, but inside of it there's a bunch of blocks stacking on top of each other. I want to organize those blocks horizontally, so what I'm going to want to do is in the CSS, I want to make that header, I want to make that row class. And generally any row, the way I think about it, in the way if you use like Bootstrap or any of those tools, is the way they think about it too, is that a row is essentially a flex box. So we change the display of that row to flex. I'm just kind of like the only property I want to put there. So now if I see, now I see the two blocks showing up. Okay, now I don't generally really want to put more properties in the row because every row might be slightly different. But the idea is just that initial display of flex will be set by this row class. So in this case, I really do want to add another class of, let's say, nav. Okay, so that I can specifically style my nav row. Okay. And we'll say that in the row here, what I want, again, is this menu piece to be all the way over here, and this to be over here. So that we use justify content, and we're going to use space between. What that does is puts all the space between these two items, so now they're on opposite sides of the page. But you see they're a little too kind of nestled up against the edges of the screen. That's not like the best look. So what I want to do is create some padding, there's some little space on the inside of the block. So I'll use some padding, and we'll say like this. We'll just say 20 pixels, just to kind of get a quick effect. Okay, so you see now it's not so nestled against the edge of the screen. That's a little bit of a better look. Okay, and we'll leave it at that. Now again, I gave that my site the logo class, so we'll target that. And we're just going to say, font size, make that a little bit bigger. Font size, 3 EMs, so it looks more like a logo. Okay, and then we're going to make it font weight, bold, or 900, That way it's nice and thick. And then font family, we'll use a different font. We'll just use one of the built-in ones. So I will just use monospace. Let's do that. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so that becomes like the logo, the site's logo. But the problem is that all these menu items are still kind of stacking on top of each other. Because even though the block those menu items in is now a flex item that's now sort of horizontal with this block, inside of that block, there's still a bunch of, that block itself is not a flex. So these things are not stacking horizontally. So I need to target that menu because we gave it a class of menu. And I'm going to make that a flex box too. So that way all those menu items become horizontal as well. And see, now those things have become horizontal. Okay, now you notice like they're not, the way it lines up with the logo is not ideal. We'll work on that. Okay, first thing I want to do is just kind of first maybe change the font size a little bit in here. Font size, we'll make it 1.5 EMs, not quite as big as the logo, but bigger than they are currently. Okay, and I may want to give it some top padding just to push that text down a little bit. Padding top. And I gotta be careful here because again, there's different size screens, so that top padding, if I just use a solid number, may not work on a smaller size screen, which I can always fix with media queries. But generally, if I can not have to use media queries, I'd rather not use media queries because it's just more things I have to maintain. So trying to think of like a relative way, maybe like a percentage. Let's see if that works. Oh, wait, that's way too much. Okay, because that's pushing it, that's 3% of the screen. So let's try to do 3%. Okay, we'll just kind of try, that's still too much. Let's try 1%. Okay, that's kind of perfect. Okay, cool. So now what we want is to target those menu items. And let's see here, what class did I give those menu items? Menu dash item. So that's the class for the menu items. Menu dash items. And you know, one thing that would make our lives easier that I didn't do yet is do this. Making a outline. So I'll just say like 2 pixels, dotted, green, and that should be an outline. What this does is just going to create a nice little outline around everything. That's going to make it easier for me to kind of see what's what. So I can see now, I can see all those blocks and where the edges of those blocks. So again, this was like the header tag, this block right here that I made a flex box. So push these 2 sets to the side. And then here's the menu block with all the little menu items inside of it that are now, that's a flex box now, lining them up or horizontally. This makes it a lot easier to kind of see how that row is shaping up. Okay. So let's take a look at those menu items. I'm going to space those out a little bit more. So I'm going to give some margin to it. But the problem is, like, if I do just margin 20 pixels, that's going to put margin 20 pixels all around. That's going to mess up my spacing a little bit. So I don't really want that top and bottom margin. Okay, so the way it works is top and bottom, then left and right. So I really just don't want to affect the margin in the first spot. So, but I do want to affect the margin, the left and right margin. So we'll say 20 pixels left and right. Okay, cool. So now, like, see, that spaces them out a little bit, and we're looking pretty good. Now, one thing I realized, like, looking at this, is that this block is taking the same height as this block. Okay, and essentially, let me think if there's a better way I could do that. I'll leave it like that. That's kind of spaced out, right? I probably should have used like a flexbox positioning type thing to like position those better. And actually, you know what? Maybe I should just do that. So I'm gonna take off this menu item. I'm gonna take out this margin because since this menu is a flex box, I could just do this instead. Justify content and do space around. Okay, and right now that doesn't do anything, but what I can do is I can give this menu a little bit more width. So we can just say width and make it take up like 50% of the container. So that'll make it take 50% of the width available this way. And see, that just evenly spaces them out. Okay, and that I think does the trick. Okay, and the cool thing about that is that that's going to readjust regardless of the screen size. So to the extent that I can use like justify content in align items to space things, I'm going to be much more responsive because that's going to automatically recalculate regardless of the size of the screen. Okay, but see, we got that nice little navigation side with like the logos on this side and the menus on this side. Now next, let's talk about the hero. Okay, so again, the hero would be sort of like generally these big block sections right after the navigation bar. So how do I want to do that? I'll show you one way to do it. Again, there's no like perfect way of doing these things. But again, see the idea here. And then what I like to do is create like a little comment. So this is like my header row. Then I can do control / on the key on VS Code to make that a comment. And this just makes it easier to kind of identify where one row begins and ends, because this gets a little unruly after very quickly. Okay, so next I'm going to be doing my hero image. And to me, that's another row. So we're going to create another div. Okay, and actually I'll just say a div with the class of row. Well, div with the class of row and the class of hero. Okay, and so now we have this row here. So that's going to be this row. Right now it just looks like a flat line, but we'll put some stuff in it. And then what I want in there is some text. So I'll just put another like p tag that says welcome. Okay, and right now, see, just that kind of looks kind of stupid. Let's look for like a hero picture. So I'm going to go to images.google.com. A good like hero background. Just to kind of find like a decent example. Generally, you want something that doesn't have like too many colors all over the place. Like this is actually kind of decent. Let's use that. So let me save this image. Actually, I'll just copy the image address. And we're going to target that hero div. Okay, so I'm going to target, and same thing with the CSS. I'm going to like, you know, create different sections. So we're going to say just like row settings. And then we're going to just say like navigation bar. Just makes it easier to kind of look through my files and find what I'm looking for. Okay, and then now we're going to start working on the hero image. There we go. Okay, so we're going to use the class of hero. I'll just get rid of this for now because that way just doesn't complain about that. Okay, dot hero. And what I want to do is give it a height, a fixed height of, let's say, 600 pixels. Okay, or actually let's do it like, let's just say 50% viewport height. So that way whatever the height of the screen is, so like if you look at it on a phone or you look at it on a different size screen, it's always going to take 50% of the height of the thing. Then I want the background image to be URL, this picture. Okay, so let's see how that's looking. Okay, cool. So like it's getting it, but see like it's repeating the background. So I want to change how that behaves. Okay, what I want is an effect called cover, which keeps the picture proportionate, doesn't like stretch the picture, doesn't repeat the picture. It makes it just nicely cover the space available. So let me see if I remember how to fix that. I think it's background position. And is that where I can choose cover? No, I don't think that's it. So let's try it out. That's a nice thing about VS Code. I can just start typing in background and it'll help me like just see the different options I have here. Space, I don't want it to repeat. Set, repeat. Is cover not an option here? Not let me do that here? Okay, that must not be the position. I always forget the one for background. I know for like if it was like a div or something. Background. Image, we did that. Color, size. Oh, we did that already. Oh wait, there it was. Cover. There we go. And see how that nicely kind of covers the location. Now the question is, I want to put this like welcome somewhere. So let me just actually see whether I didn't give this a class, but I don't need to give it a class necessarily, because I can style it relative to the hero class. I can just say a p tag within the hero class. Not everything needs to have a class. And what I want this is to be kind of big, font size, not quite as big as the logo, so we'll say 2.5 EMs, which means 2.5 EMs means 250% of the relative font size. I always forget which one. I mean, there's rems, which are like relative EMs, and EMs, And I always forget which one's relative to what. So like EMs, Ms, and RAMs. Okay, let's just confirm that. Okay. M's and RAMs. Okay, so here M's are two relative lengths. You like blah blah blah. The recap, M units means my parent element's font size. Okay, yep. So there we go. So RAM stands for root element measurement. So basically, rem is always relative to whatever the root font size is. That means like the font size, the default font size of the browser. So whatever that is, you're saying like 1 would be 100% of that size, 2 would be 200% of that size, while the M's will use the font size of whatever it's currently in. So if I change the fonts, if I were to actually change the font size of, let's say, like the body tag, and then all the M's would be relative to that. So if I wanted to do like, okay, body font size 10, then what would happen is if I do 2 M's, that would be a font size of 20 because it's 200% of the relative font size. Okay, so that's just a little bit on that. I think like the default font size typically in a browser is like 16.5 or 17.5. So right now I'm doing it relative to that because I haven't actually stated a font size anywhere else for it to be relative to. Font size, I want this to be font weight. I want it to be nice and bold. And I want it to be be color white. And the cool thing about this is if I do it this way, I mean, I could use, there's 2 ways I can position it. We'll do it both ways. First, I'll do it, I think what's probably the easier way, is make the hero div a flexbox. So again, display flexbox is great for everything. So it's a flexbox. So now I can use those flexbox positioning properties to position those items. So I want this div to, let's say, be centered. So we'll say justify content. Actually, no, I want this flush to the right. So that would be flex end. Okay, and see now it welcomes off to the right. And then I want it vertically, I want it centered. I want it centered. That's interesting that the height of the div is so high. But I guess it's because it's within that element. Okay, we'll deal with the height in a second. But if I want to align the block vertically, align items, then I would want to center this. Okay, and see like that centered that. So I'm pretty much getting much closer to where I want to be. And now what I can do over here is I can then just use like some margin left, not margin padding, because padding is on the inside. Padding left, no, right actually, padding on the right, and do something like 20%. And then see that'll push it there, and then I can make the font size maybe the font size should be bigger. So make it 40 M's. But now it's too much padding, so let's make the padding like 10%. Okay, and you get this that cool little hero effect. Okay, I could also use position. So let's say I did not use this flexbox stuff. What I could then do is here I would make the position of this div relative, which means it's going to be relative to the container that it's in. So it's going to be relative to this spot right here. If I were to make position absolute, it's relative to this spot right here, the top right corner of the page. And now I can use like top. I can use like top. So how far do I want it from the top? We'll say like 40% from the top. And see like that position is it there, but I don't really kind of want it that far from the top. So then I can just kind of keep trying to position it until I get it where I want it. That kind of looks good. And then I would position it from, I could do right, left, top, bottom, but I'm going to say, hey, how far do I want it from the left? So left, I'm going to say 70%, because I really kind of want it off to the right. Okay, that's too much. So let's go down to 50%. And then, you kind of get that same effect again. Okay, and so those are the 2 ways I could have gotten sort of that effect. Okay, another thing you see on websites is like a call to action where you see like just like big text and some words and a button. So let's try that out. Okay. Okay, so let's make another row. So again, Let's do a call to action row. Shift, okay. So I'm gonna make another div with a row dot CTA for call to action. Okay, so there's that row. So I have a class that's more specific to that block, but I have the row that just kind of applies that default sort of like flex box for a row, just so I don't have to keep retyping flex. Okay, so if you know there's certain styles you're gonna be typing a lot, just you know, make a utility class. Okay, so what do I really want to do here? What I want is another div, and we'll just call that div a div. We don't need to give it a special name. Inside that div, we want there to be some text. So say, you should do the thing. And then below it is a button that says, click here to do the thing. Okay, so see right now that looks ugly. Okay, so let's work on that. Okay, so now we're gonna do the call to action section. So call to action, again, organized code is happy code. Okay, so in this case what I want to do is I want to center that block. Okay, again, it's a flex box, so I can make that pretty easy. So we'll just say, first we'll just target that CTA class I added to the row, and I'm going to just say justify content, and then I'm going to center it. Okay, and so see now that block is centered. Awesome. And now I want to target that P tag and make that font nice and big. But actually I would like to give that some padding. I want to make this like, give it a lot. You always give this a lot of space. So padding, let's give padding of like 5%. Yeah, so nice, see, nice and a lot of space. You always want to call to action to kind of have a lot of space, so that way that sentence just kind of pops, and people are like, oh, I should do the thing, and I'm going to click the button and do the thing. Okay, so now let's target that text. So that's in a P tag. So again, we have our CTA block. That's the class that's on the row div. And inside of that, there's another div, and inside of that, there's a P tag. So that's what I'm targeting. Okay, so that P tag that's inside the call to action block, I want that font to be big. So we'll say 4 EMs, nice and big. You should do the thing. Okay, with that, that's looking like maybe I should lower the padding now. So let's change that down to 3%. Okay, maybe 2%. Okay, cool. So that's fine there. Okay, and actually I want to center everything in that div. So like I don't need to center the text because that kind of fills up the space. But this button here, I don't like the positioning of that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just say you have to do that in the div. So it's the div inside the CTA. CTA div. I want the text align to be center. Okay, and then we can target that button and make that button look more buttony and more call to actiony. So .cta div p button. Okay, so there's the p tag and then there's a button. Because again, we see that it's like the p, they're not inside of each other. So it's I'm targeting this div because it has the class of CTA, and inside of it there's a div, and inside of it there's a button. So that's what I'm targeting with this selector. And what I want, I always want to give buttons a lot of padding because that space makes the button just look nicer. So padding, we'll just give it like 15 pixels. See, that's already looking better. Okay, I like to change the color. That default gray is just so Web 2.0 or Web 1.0 really. Okay, so let's see here. Background color, we'll use that. We'll just say like brown because we have that brown in the hero image. Okay, and then color, the font color will be white. Okay, now that font color, that's not going to work for us. I mean that font style, so font family, we want to do something a little bit more interesting. Let's just do Arial. Okay, oh, I didn't really change anything. Well, I'll worry about, I'll come back to that. Font size. We want that to be bigger, so we'll say 2 EMs. Maybe that's probably gonna be too big. Yes, too big. So let's do 1 EMs. Well, first let's make it bold and see if that's good. Font weight, 900. Okay, and I don't like that it's there's this much space between that. So I really want to change maybe the margin around this. I want to zero out the margin on this P tag. There we go. Maybe not 0. Let's give it like 20 pixels. Okay, and then let's go back and up the margin around the block itself. And yeah, that's looking a lot better. Okay, so you can see like, hey, look, that's the call to action. It's like, you should do the thing, click the button. Okay, so that's kind of getting the effect that we want. Okay, so you can see like the navigation bar, the hero image, call to action, and really the last piece we kind of want to do here is some cards. We'll do some cards. Cards are just like a lot of little blocks that kind of just show up in a row. So some cards. Okay, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the row. So div.row.cards, and then we're gonna have the individual cards, which will be other divs. So we'll say div that has a class of card, so that represents one individual card, and we're gonna have 3 of those. Okay, and I'm not gonna even worry about putting anything in them. We're just gonna show like how they end up being there. Okay, so .cards, and then I want that to be, well, first we just give the cards some shape so that we can see what's happening with the cards. So let's make the cards I always like to make them have a width of 30%, so I want them to be a third of the page. Okay, but I want the minimum width to be 300 pixels, because what's going to happen is that basically on a small phone, 300 pixels should end up with them sort of being in a row, for the exception of like the Galaxy Fold. Like there's like this one phone where it's like you have like a 200 pixel width, but you can't plan for like, you can use media queries if you really want to target that. Minimum width, I haven't seen anyone with that phone. Minimum width 300 pixels, but for most phone, like for the smallest generally width, which is like the iPhone 5, your 300 pixels should be like perfect, like fit in there, because like the width of the phone is like 325, so that's going to make it where it's like one card per row in that situation. Okay, so 300 pixels, but the thing is that again, we're still not going to really see them until we give them a height, and we're going to give them a height of, let's say, 500 pixels. Okay, just to make them visible. So you see we have these 3 cards. Okay, and right now, probably that height is, well, let's see here. Yeah, looks looking a little funky, so we'll deal with that in a second. Let's see what happens if I make these 200 pixels. Okay, so you see here we have the 3 cards, 1, 2, 3, and then some extra space. So I want to space those out a little bit, and maybe actually even make those a little bit smaller. So maybe 150 is more what I'm talking about. Minimum width 150. Okay, but right now they're perfectly 30%. That's fine. Okay. So first thing, again, cards is going to be the row. So in that case, we want to use like justify content to like space them. So this would be a good one. This is a good candidate for space around. So you see what that does, it like more evenly distributes the space, so that way they're all nice. And just so that way the cards are more visible, I'm going to give them a border of like, we'll say brown, well, 2 pixels solid brown. Okay, so we can see like 3 cards there. Okay, and then see there you have like your cards. I may want to give them a little padding, so that way they, not that, well, technically if I take off the outline, so like if I comment out this outline for a second, you'll see like it's not so bad. See, there you go, you see you have like this card effect. the cards are probably a little too tall. So in that case, what I want to do is change this to maybe like 400. Let's try that. Yeah, that's starting to look more cardy. Let's try 350. That's probably a more ideal height. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and then, you know, I can start putting in content in these. So I can be like H1, card 1. Okay. And then, well, again, I'll just make the basic boilerplate here. Then maybe we want some text in there, so I'll put like a P tag. We'll add some lorem ipsum text in there. And maybe a couple buttons. So what I'll do is I'll actually make a separate div of buttons, div.buttons, so that we can have like some buttons in there. Button 1, button, and that one's gonna have text of 2. Okay, although it looks like I put that outside of the card, so let me take that, put that back in the card. And there we go. So see, like each, oh, I put that 2 in the wrong place. Okay, there we go. So see, like you have the basic content in the card. So let me just do that for the other 2 cards. Card 2, card 3. And then like I'll just work on like, now I can just work on styling what's inside the card because I've established sort of like the spacing of the generic cards. So, you know, I want that, let's say card, the H1 inside of the card, I want it to be sort of centered. So text align center. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. And then that P tag, the card P. Okay, so we'll also say text align. Text align. Let's try justified. Okay, and then I kind of want some padding on that. That's just looks too nestled against the edges of the box. Yeah, that looks a little bit more aesthetic, but let's give it a little bit more. A little bit more. There we go. And then the buttons. So again, we put that in a class of buttons. So I'll do .card.buttons. So target that particular div. Okay, and then I want those buttons to be centered. So and then buttons are inline. Buttons are inline content, so that means the buttons are going to be centered through text align. Okay, good. And then let's target the buttons themselves. And actually, I want the basic styling of the button to be the same as the other button. We'll start with that. So let me just, I can do a comma here, and then just say, hey, do buttons, button. So target the buttons that are inside of there. And yeah, that's not such a bad effect. Okay, that makes it a little consistent. Only thing I want to do is add some margin between those buttons. So margin, we'll say, you know, 10 pixels. Oops. So this would be card.buttons button. Because I'm going to target the button tag in the button. There you go. You kind of have like this very basic effect. Again, I could spend several more hours styling and making this look a lot prettier, but this kind of gives you the basic effect of most types of just basic rows. And again, how did I approach it? I did row 1, then I did row 2, then I did row 3, and again, if I set that outline up, again, it makes it just easier to kind of see what's going on. So while you're setting that all up, okay, so using that outline is always a good technique to make it easier to position things. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Hopefully you enjoyed this video on some CSS positioning for nav bars, hero images, call to actions, and cards. Have a wonderful day and enjoy. Thank you very much.